I passed a park on my way home late one night. As I walked towards it from a distance, I turned to look at the park and something felt off. As I got closer, I realized just what it was. One of the telephone poles was oddly tall, and on top of it stood a woman with long hair and black clothes. Her face was pale, and she was grinning. I knew I shouldn't meet her gaze, so I quickly looked away and kept walking. But it was, in a word, utterly creepy. I didn't have any ability to see ghosts whatsoever, so I was kind of curious about what I saw that night. As such, I went back during the day to have another look. The telephone pole looked exactly the same as the others, making it seem all the more real. But even setting aside whether there was or wasn't a ghost, the fact still remains that telephone pole was still taller than all the others. Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. In case you missed it, Toshiden, Exploring Japanese Urban Legends Volume 4 is now available. Once again, there are a host of new legends to explore, both horrifying, bizarre, and otherwise. And of course, a new season of the podcast to go with it. That started just recently, so if you haven't checked it out yet, it's available right now. This week, we're looking at some weird, twisted tales that defy explanation. First up, there exist stories of something red that's said to knock on people's doors. But what is it? And what does it want? Find out in Akamane. This may seem a little sudden, but ever since I read about it in a book, I have been collecting stories about the creature known as Akamane. Just like its name would suggest, it comes from the words red and imitation. Apparently, this creature has been seen all over the country. And so, using all of the information that's in this thread, I'd like to hear if anyone else has similar stories. Most of the stories I've heard about Akamane go a little something like this. One day, shortly after moving in, a woman was at home when she heard the doorbell ring. Being that they had just moved in, they didn't yet know anyone in the area, nor could they recall anyone planning to visit them at the present time. Not wanting to deal with a potentially annoying salesman, the woman looked through the peephole to see who was outside. But nobody was there. That's weird, she thought, but when she returned to the living room, again, the doorbell rang. Again, she looked through the peephole, but nobody was there. She returned to the living room once more, and yet again, the doorbell rang. Oh, I know, she thought, and rather than moving to the front door, this time she went to her daughter's room, where she could see the entrance, and pulled back the curtains. In front of the door stood a bright red figure that was shaped like a person. Whew, she thought, quickly withdrawing from the window, but then the doorbell rang again. What on earth was that? She couldn't stop shaking in fear, and each time the doorbell rang, she shrank back further and further. What if that thing realized she was there? With that in mind, she left the children's room, but the sight before her left her speechless. The small window above the door, the one to let light in, had a red face and hands pressed against it. It had to be over 2 meters tall. What on earth should I do? And as she was thinking that, suddenly her daughter arrived home. Was everything okay? She asked in surprise. What do you mean? The daughter laughed in reply. A few days later, some friends came over to celebrate their new move. But it was only the husband who entered the house, "Where's your wife?" they asked. "I don't know," he said, confused. "She dropped me off downstairs and then rushed to go back home." As the party was in full swing, they decided to call the wife to see what was up. "This is a little difficult to say," she hesitated before continuing. "But when I arrived at the building, there was this large red figure standing in front of your apartment on the 5th floor. It was bent over at the hip, looking inside. My husband apparently couldn't see it, but I was too scared to go up, so I came back home." They then spoke to an acquaintance about the strange sighting. "It might be a sign that a fire is going to break out soon," they said. And so, for a while, the family were especially careful when it came to any fires in the house. But there never was a fire, and they never saw that red figure again either. So, these are the characteristics of Akamane that I've collected over the years. Its body is red. Rarely, it might be green or yellow. It might be similar to the scary story, The Blue Man Comes. Akamane is just the most orthodox colour, but it can come in colours other than red too. It's rather large, and although it resembles a person, it doesn't always necessarily have a face. It's rather elusive and unpredictable, appearing at random locations. I've never heard of it possessing anyone either. I've heard that it might be an omen of something, and most people seem to think that it's an omen of impending fire. Rarely, it may appear at someone's front door, pretending to be an acquaintance. This seems to be where it gets its name from. Some people can see it, others can't. Judging by books and the internet, it seems to be spotted rather frequently, so I think some people here might have similar stories. I'll be discussing strange stories over this New Year's period, so if there's anyone here who knows anything, please let me know. The young man in this next story often hears a motorbike late at night, but it heads into a nearby forest that ends in a dead end. Despite this, he's never able to catch it leaving. What's really going on? Find out in Truth of the Motorbike. My family home is in the countryside. There are no houses behind us either, only a mountain. However, when I was in the 2nd grade of high school, every night around 10 p.m, I saw what appeared to be a motorbike enter the forest every single night. I told my parents about it, but they said they'd never seen it. They dismissed it as a hunter or someone dealing with the matsutake mushrooms there, and that was that. Even our pet dog outside never reacted to it. Pretty much every single night, that motorbike rode into the forest. I don't know whether it returned while I was asleep or not, but I personally never saw it leave the forest after entering. And while I think of it, there wasn't even anywhere to go inside the forest. The narrow gravel path soon ended, and there were no other trails after that. I decided that I would figure out who it was on that bike, and so, one night, I hid in the small shed by the vegetable patch to keep watch. Around 10 p.m, that bike rode into the forest. My plan was to hang around smoking some cigarettes I picked up until the bike returned, and then I would shine my light on it. But next thing I knew, I was dreaming about something or other, and then I woke up. It appeared I had fallen asleep. My watch said 4 a.m, and I didn't see the bike leave after that either. I had to change tactics. I stretched some string across the farm road, attached a device that would make a sound when it was pulled, and then put a microphone in a nearby shed that would pick up that sound and play it on the radio. I even camouflaged the string by dyeing it in black ink, so it would be hard to see even under headlights. Then I plugged my earphones into the radio. That way, I would notice the bike even if I was asleep. Now, those of you reading this might think, you can just go out at 10 p.m. and see without all of this hassle. And that was exactly what I did as well. But the bike never appeared if I was lying in wait. I puffed on a cigarette in the shed while I listened to the radio. The only thing I could hear through the radio waves was silence. Then I felt myself getting drowsy. And then I heard it. The sound of the string snapping and a bike's engine. I had set the string about 50 meters inside the forest from the shed. If I ran, I'd be able to see who it was on the bike as it was coming out. But that bike was nowhere to be seen. I had most definitely heard a sound, and when I checked the string, it was broken. But there was no bike anywhere. Thoroughly confused, I went back to the shed to check something. I had recorded that sound from the radio onto a tape. I rewound it to the beginning and then played it back. Silence filled the air for a while, and then I heard the sound of a bike approaching. I could even hear the noisy sounds of a cub changing gears. So there really was a bike. But then I heard something else. Caw. A faint voice, one that seemed to be in pain and on the verge of disappearing, was calling out, "Caw." Immediately, I thought of my aunt. She was my father's younger sister who died of polio when she was just 8. Her name ended in Caw. I had no evidence, but I was certain that voice didn't come from a living person. Then the fear hit me. I almost crawled back to the house. Then I dove under the blankets and closed my eyes. I told my parents about it the next day. I even made them listen to the tape. After listening to it, my father called his mother and made her listen to it too. She listened in shock and then broke down in tears. Apparently, my grandfather lost it after his daughter passed away from illness, and he started drinking every day. On his last day alive, he drank himself almost to death and said that he was going to pick up his daughter. He rode his cub into the forest that night, and then he fell into a mountain stream and died. The voice on that tape apparently sounded just like my grandfather, even down to his habit of saying "ooh" before he started talking. A local shaman woman then listened to the tape for us and gave it a memorial service. On a trip back to their family home, a mother shows her son an interesting photo from her childhood. But what exactly is wrong with this seemingly normal photo? What's the terrifying story behind it? Find out in Interesting Photo. I just got back home yesterday from visiting my mother's family home, but while I was there, I saw something that I can't really explain. Oh, and before I forget, her family home is on an isolated island off the coast. I've visited her family home numerous times before, so I was just lying around with nothing to do. Because I looked bored, my mother brought over a photo album. I've got an interesting photo to show you," she said. It was a photo of my mother and one of her friends when they were in high school, and there were 2 middle-aged men with them as well. Behind the 4 of them was an unpaved path, and 10 or so meters beyond that, a cliff. Beyond the cliff was the ocean. My mother and her friend were in sportswear, while the men were wearing jackets. At a glance, it looked like the type of photo you might take with some uncles who dragged you out on a trip. Honestly, I had no idea why it was supposed to be interesting, so I asked my mother about it. "Oh, it's a ghost photo," she said, like it was no big deal. She said it so casually that I wasn't afraid either. Either way, it was still the first time I'd seen a ghost photo, so I looked it over again to see what was odd about it. Was there a hand on someone's shoulder? A face floating in the air, maybe? Or maybe a body part was mysteriously missing? But no matter where I looked, I couldn't find anything strange. "What exactly makes this a ghost photo?" I asked, confused. When I was in the 2nd grade of high school, I went cycling around the island with 2 friends. "We took this photo then," she said. At first, I was confused, but then it began to dawn on me. Although, that just made me even more confused. So that meant the 3 of them went cycling, and one of them took a photo of the other 2. So then, who were the 2 old guys? I asked my mother to tell me more, and the location of the photo was somewhere I knew well. There was a drama a while back called Dr. Koto's Clinic. I wonder if anyone remembers it. Anyway, it looked quite similar to the scenery in the opening of that. There was a path that followed a cliff by the sea, and it was nothing but grasslands. No houses or buildings in sight anywhere. It was an area where maybe cars passed once every 3 hours or so. Ghost photos can generally be scientifically explained by light or the reflections of nearby people, right? But according to my mother, when they took this photo, there weren't any other people nearby, let alone these 2 men. It was just the 3 of them, all high school girls. There wasn't anything blocking the view, and the area had great visibility. There were no doubt no people for several kilometers all around. And if so, then, at the very least, the photo wasn't showing anyone who might have been nearby. And the photo was far too clear for it to just be the light. Nor was anything transparent. Their bodies weren't distorted either. They looked just like regular people. And until my mother told me about it, I thought it was just a regular photo with 4 people in it. It was nothing like a ghost photo you might see on TV. It was the first ghost photo I'd ever seen, where the ghosts were captured so clearly, and the first where there was no way to realistically explain how they had been captured. Of course, it was possible that my mother was lying. All she had to do was say this photo of 4 people was actually only supposed to be 2. But my mother had never once lied about anything like this before, and if it were a lie, it was a rather sloppy one. Looking back on it now, there's something else about that photo that bothers me though. My mother and her friend were looking straight at the camera, but the 2 men, they weren't looking at the camera at all. Rather, they were staring at something past the camera. As I said before, the area was wide and open with nothing else to see. So what on earth were those 2 men looking at? I saw it only a few days ago, but I wonder what on earth they captured in that photo. A student invites his friend to stay the night because he's scared to be in his apartment alone. He hears footsteps outside, and he knows that soon they're going to stop right in front of his apartment. But who do the footsteps belong to, and what do they want? Find out in Stairs in Front of the Apartment. When I was in high school, a good friend of mine invited me to stay at his place over the weekend. "My parents won't be home, so let's drink," he said. It wasn't like I had any plans, but I refused. Still, he wouldn't give up. "Invite someone else," I said. But for whatever reason, he really wanted me, and me alone, to come over. He was so annoying about it that I asked, "What? Are you scared of being home alone?" And at that, he fell silent. "What? Am I right?" I continued, and suddenly his face turned serious. "Hey, do you believe in ghosts?" he asked. Wondering what the hell he was going on about, I answered, "Well, I've never seen one, but I can't say for sure that they don't exist." "So, come to my place this weekend. Then you'll see that they do exist," he said. "Huh? So you're saying I should come and see then?" "But I think I'll pass," I replied. "Please, come on," he said, almost in tears. "All right, well, what kind of ghost is it?" "It climbs the stairs, one step at a time, at midnight every night. And this weekend, they should stop right in front of my place. That's why I don't want to be alone," he said, sounding genuinely terrified. He was incredibly persistent, and it did seem kind of interesting. So I said, "Sure, I'll go." Thank you. And so I visited my friend's apartment that weekend. We chatted, watched TV, and played video games. And then, around 11 p.m, we started talking about ghosts. "Hey, so what do you mean by the ghost climbs the stairs?" "About a week ago, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs outside, but I was the only one who could hear them. When I told my parents, they said they didn't hear anything." "So then, those footsteps will reach the top tonight?" "Yeah, I've been counting them, so there's no doubt in my mind. Today, they should reach my front door." "Maybe they'll keep going. There are more floors above here, right?" "I did consider that, but maybe they'll stop here instead. And that terrifies me." "I see." "Hey, you can hear it, right? Footsteps," my friend then said. But I couldn't hear anything. "I don't hear a thing." "Why? You can hear them, right? See? They just took another step." "Calm down. I don't hear anything. You're just imagining things." "Why? Why can't you hear anything? Listen!" "I said I don't hear anything. Calm down." I was getting annoyed, but I tried to calm him down. Unfortunately, he wouldn't listen to me. "They stopped. It's in front of the door right now." "Well, then, do you want me to open it and take a look?" I asked, but he frantically grabbed me and stopped me. "Stop! Don't open the door. It's there. It's right there. It'll be fine. There's nothing there. My tone got rougher as well as I tried to calm him down. But then suddenly, he stopped. It's useless. It's been watching me this whole time. I can't escape it. Huh? What are you saying? There's nothing there. You're fine. Now, suddenly I was afraid as well. It's knocking. It's knocking on the door, he said. And then he immediately started screaming and ran towards it. It was all so sudden that I couldn't even move. Screaming, he opened the door and ran outside. Panicking, I followed him, but I was too late. He jumped over the railing. Nothing made any sense. What on earth just happened? All I remembered after that was being questioned by the police. I told them everything I remembered about the situation. Unexpectedly, the police readily accepted what I said. I thought they would have been more suspicious. But that wasn't all. One of the officers then muttered, "Again? Again? What did he mean, again?" Confused by this unnatural utterance, I asked him what he meant by it. "What do you mean, again?" "I probably shouldn't say anything, but you are connected to this, so you're probably better off knowing." It turned out that my friend's strange death wasn't the first, and that the same thing had happened several times in that same apartment over the years. The police still didn't know why, though. In the end, his death was chalked up to a mental breakdown. I was sad and shocked, and just like that, it all ended without any other answers. I had no idea what it was my friend heard out there, and what it was that had him so afraid. When I thought everything was finally over, I got a phone call. It was from my friend's mother. "Sorry for calling you so late. I'm terribly sorry for what happened." No, I'm the one who's sorry," I said, trying to find the right words to say. This might sound strange, but my son definitely died, right?" "Eh?" What on earth was she saying? They'd already held the wake and funeral. Did she also lose her mind from the shock of her son's death? "Well, you see, there's someone knocking at the door right now. It's my son." At least that's what it sounded like she said. When a sick child wakes up late one night, they notice something odd in the paper sliding doors across from them. It seems someone is poking holes. But how can that be when the other side of these doors is made of glass? What is trying to get in? Find out in Holes in the Sliding Door. This happened when I was a kid, in the latter years of elementary school. At the time, I slept in a traditional Japanese-style room with tatami flooring and paper sliding doors. One night, I was in bed with a high fever, and at some point, I woke up. When you're laid up in bed all day, you tend to wake up at odd hours, right? Of course, the lights were off and the sliding doors were closed, so my room was pitch black. But even in the dark, you can still see a little once your eyes adjust. Plus, there were lights outside. So before long, I was able to see somewhat. And as I lay in bed, I stared at the sliding screen doors. Something about my room felt off. It was my same old room, but there was a sense of wrongness. It wasn't like how you stare at something for too long and suddenly it feels weird, but there was just something wrong with my room. And then I realized what it was. There were several holes in my paper sliding doors that I had put there myself, but now it seemed there were even more. How weird. Were there always that many holes? I thought, counting them. Thanks to my high fever, I was still kind of groggy. But there were clearly more than usual. There should only be 3, and yet now I counted at least 7. This was just too weird, I thought, and so I tried counting them again. Rip! I saw a hole tear open right in front of my eyes. For a moment, I froze. The other side of the sliding doors was made of glass, and of course, it was closed. There was no way you could make a hole from the outside of the room. Confused, I just stared at the screens. But then, it happened again. Rip! Another hole appeared. Terrified, I wanted to jump out of bed, but thanks to the fever, I had no energy, and so all I could do was lay there. I didn't want to look at the screens anymore, but I was also too scared to turn away. As I debated what to do, it happened again. Rip! But this time, 5 holes appeared at once. They looked just like 5 fingers pushing through at once. Then, the 5 holes dragged down, clearly tearing through the paper. If you actually pressed your fingers through paper and then tried to tear down, then it wouldn't be clean, right? It would all start to tear in the middle. And as soon as I had that thought, that was exactly what happened. The paper all tore away in the middle. By this point, I was almost in tears, but I couldn't look away. And from that large hole that had been torn in the paper, long black hair appeared. It didn't matter whether the glass on the outside was closed or not. I knew that a ghost was trying to get in. More and more hair appeared, and then the woman's head pushed through. At that point, I passed out. When I came back to, it was morning. I was relieved to see I'd safely made it through the night, but I got chills when I remembered what happened. I turned to look at the sliding doors, but now there were no holes at all. The relief I felt was once again replaced with unease. There wasn't a single hole left in the paper. Even the ones I had put there were all gone. It was like someone had entirely replaced the paper with some that was brand new. I stared strangely at the doors, but the paper still had that yellowed look to it of paper that had been attached long ago. It was just the holes that were gone. I told my parents about what happened, but they didn't believe me. They just said the holes were never there to begin with. But I had put them there myself, so I knew. Until our house was renovated sometime after that, I made sure to always sleep with my back to those sliding doors. Luckily, nothing strange ever happened apart from that night, but when I remember the sight of all those holes suddenly appearing, I still get chills. A nurse gets more than he bargained for late one night in a hospital that specializes in care for the elderly. But who is this young woman in the hall, and what is it that she's after? Find out in You'll Get Used to It. This happened to my older brother. My older brother works as a nurse at a hospital for the elderly in Kanagawa. It's a hospital that has all sorts of typical stories surrounding it, like the elevators moving at night when nobody is around and such. But this story I'm about to tell you is the most terrifying thing that ever happened to my brother there. One night, he was working alone in the nurse's office. As he was writing some documents, suddenly he saw a figure swaying down the end of the hall on the edge of his vision. At the time, he apparently just thought it was a patient who had gotten up to go to the toilet. But no matter how long he waited, that figure just kept hanging around the hall on the edge of his vision. When he turned to properly look, it appeared to be a young woman in a yukata with long hair. Thinking she must have slept during the day, and so couldn't sleep now, he turned back to his papers. But then, it suddenly hit him. There's no way. This was a hospital specializing in the elderly. There were no young female patients. And if it were a nurse working the same late shift as him, she would be wearing a uniform, so he'd be able to tell at a glance. And supposing she were a family member of a critically ill patient, he should have been notified as well. But there weren't even any critically ill patients that night to begin with. So then, who the hell was she? Then, as he lifted his head, there she stood, right in front of his nose. Her long hair, pale blank face, and eyes that reflected nothing. The moment their eyes met, my brother turned on his heel and went straight back to the nurse's office on another floor. When the nurse on that floor saw the state my brother was in, she didn't even wait for him to say anything before going, "You'll get used to it soon enough." In the moment, my brother thought she had nerves of steel. Oh, and to this day, my brother still has no idea who that woman was and how she's connected to the hospital. And finally this week, a young host from Kabukicho encounters a strange customer that briefly makes him regret his decisions, but he's yet to figure out how much worse things can be. Find out why in Blanket Woman. I'm a 24-year-old man, and this story I'm about to tell you really happened to me. It might not be that scary, but I hope you'll listen. I was 19 when I first started working at a host club. I spent a year at a vocational school, but after graduation I couldn't find any work, so I set out for Kabukicho. You might think that only good-looking guys can work as hosts, but that's not true. Even someone like me, who looks like Fukawa Ryo, could do well enough to eat. I spent my days walking around the front of the station, thinking about how I could fool women into coming back to the club with me. I probably brought in over 10 groups of people a day. This is what they call catching in the business, but if you're a host who already has quite a few regulars, then you don't have to go out to do this. Instead, they serve the customers that the new guys bring in and try to make them their own. 2 years passed and I was now doing well enough for myself that I had customers pretty much every single day. One day, I didn't have any customers at the club and I couldn't reach any of my regulars either. Being bored, I decided to go out with one of the new guys and do a little catching. We went over to the East Shinjuku exit. "Hey, do you want to go for a drink?" I asked a woman. "Sure. Where's your club? Sounds fun." Thinking myself lucky for nabbing a woman so quickly, I let the new guy know that I was heading back to the club. "See you later, man." "Ah, Are you going back? Sure am. Wow, that was quick. The woman chatted happily as we walked to the club, and I noticed she was holding a rather large bag. Ah, she's not used to host clubs, huh? This is gonna be easy, I thought, smiling back at her. But then suddenly, she stopped. So how does it feel when you deceive a woman? What the hell? Why was she asking that all of a sudden? But I couldn't exactly not bring her back to the club after already telling them I was coming. I've never once thought of deceiving a woman. Why? I said. But at the same time, I realized something was odd. This was perhaps the first time I'd really taken a good look at the woman. What I thought was a bag in her arms was actually a rolled-up blanket. You don't think this person meant to deceive me either? She asked. This person? In the blanket? There was nobody else nearby that she could be referring to. Next thing I knew, the woman was biting her bottom lip so hard that blood was dripping down. We were already close to the club, but this woman was crazy, I thought, so I pretended to get a call from them. Sorry, apparently the club's full, so we'll have to come back next time, I said, and then I walked the woman back to the station in silence. Feeling relieved, but also oddly exhausted, I was on my way back to the club when I got a call. It was from the new guy I set out with before. Ah, are you back already? He asked. Yeah, I almost brought this crazy woman back just before. Seriously? Oh, I just found a customer as well, so I'm on my way back. Alright, I'll be waiting here for you. As I was chatting with the owner, the new guy arrived. A customer is entering the building! Welcome! Everyone called out as he came in with a woman. My heart almost stopped. The woman he brought back was that same woman with the blanket. But a moment later, I was shocked again. The owner ran into the kitchen and came running back with some salt, which he threw at the woman. The new guy and I both stood there, utterly confused as to what was going on. The woman screamed and ran around the club, and then, in the blink of an eye, she disappeared. Eh? The new guy and I both said at the same time. So she's back, huh? The owner said, his eyes bloodshot. She's dangerous, so you better watch out for her. Huh? No, but, where on earth did she go? I said. Huh? A ghost? Was she a ghost? The new guy continued. We were both so worked up that I don't even remember what we said after that. According to the owner, there was a woman several years back who used to show up at the club with a blanket. Whenever she came, sales skyrocketed. And for sure, that day the club was absolutely packed with customers too. But that wasn't the end of the story. Apparently, any host who joined her in conversation or spoke kindly to her would end up dying. Apparently, several hosts before my time had died. The new guy and I were super worked up, as neither of us had seen a ghost before. But at the same time, we were worried that maybe we were going to be cursed as well. We couldn't focus on the job, so the owner went with us to get purified, although he waited outside the shrine while we were there. I don't know whether she's a ghost or not, but if we use her well, we can make a lot of money, so I don't need to be purified. And "Don't tell the other guys about it or they'll freak out and quit too," he said. Being a host ran deep in his blood, I thought, strangely impressed. But also, the entire experience still freaked me out. It was both my first and last scary experience, but I quit being a host this year, so I thought I'd share my story. Both that new guy and I are doing fine these days, although the new guy lost his right pinky finger. I lost my left little toe in a different accident as well. The new guy lost his finger at a construction job while I just fell off my bike and my shoe got stuck in a concrete ditch. I don't think it was a coincidence, however, that we both lost a little finger or toe. I wonder if that's what was inside that woman's blanket. The little toes and fingers of hosts. Looking back on it now, there have to be some other hosts in Kabukicho who have had the same experience, right? For those thinking about it or already working there, make sure you keep away from the woman with the blanket in the white dress. A huge thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Emerald and Kenneth Kawamoto. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Toshiden, Exploring Japanese Urban Legends Volume 4, out right now. And check out our merchandise store at kowabana-shop.fourthwall.com. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.